If you're right, you're right.
I don't think I am afraid.
I'm not that different.
You can't make excuses.
I pursue my passions and then say, hey, this is a great story. Do you want to listen?
Toronto lawyer Alan Young is an enemy of the establishment, a rebel with many causes, and sometimes the devil's advocate. But he is also one of the sharpest legal minds in Canada who's never shied away from lost causes or unpopular clients. Young figured out early on in his career that the law could be used to challenge the status quo. An irresistible challenge. Alan Young is our profile tonight on Person to Person, and a warning to parents. Some of the language in this story may not be suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
Do not assume that criminal law and principles of morality are coextensive.
Law professor and criminal lawyer Alan Young likes to say he's best known for losing some high-profile cases. But he argues it's not always about winning. What matters is bringing important issues to the public's attention. In 1998, he unsuccessfully defended Thornhill dominatrix Terry Jean Bedford against charges that she ran a bawdy house. And Young spent 22 months trying, unsuccessfully, to avoid a trial for author Stephen Williams. Williams is accused of illegally viewing videotapes of Paul Bernardo's torture murders.
We're trying to establish a privilege whereby journalists cannot be compelled to disclose their sources unless there's compelling reasons to do so, like national security.
He's also a longtime crusader for relaxing our drug laws. In May of 1999, his client, AIDS patient Jim Wakeford, became the first Canadian allowed to smoke marijuana for medicinal purposes. Young's legal career is built on a single foundation. If you aren't hurting anyone but yourself, what you do behind closed doors is your own business. After almost 20 years, Young is near the pinnacle of his profession, yet he's on the verge of doing the unthinkable, abandoning his legal career to concentrate on writing and improving his spiritual side through activities like shiatsu massage. It's another fascinating twist in a life that has already gone through a lot of twists and turns. I spoke with Alan Young at his home in Toronto. Alan, let's start at the beginning.
Sure.
Because there's always clues to who we are back then. Something that's very interesting is that you lived in one of the richest parts of Toronto. I know you probably don't want to hear that, but you did. You lived on the bridle path, but before that, life wasn't quite so rich, I guess. Tell us about that.
It was very modest. We lived with my grandfather. I shared a room with him. He died when I was 8. And 2 years later, my father took us for a drive to that bridle path area and showed us a house that was being built, and we started playing in it and having fun, my sister and I, and then he said, we're going to move here. It's embarrassing for me to talk about. I mean, we had a swimming pool, we had a tennis court. After we moved in, all the real rich people started coming. The owner of Cadillac Fairview built a mausoleum beside us. Tour buses used to come by. And then Canadian Tire built across from us. They had a swimming pool in the middle of their house that you could jump in from the 3rd floor. That's when I started to realize that this is a bit out of hand. So I never fit in very well, and by the time I was 12, I was a Marxist. And it's always been hard for me to understand how you can enjoy wealth when you know there's so much poverty in the world. And it's, by the way, it's getting worse. I mean, we're not as politicized, I think, in the 90s and the new millennium as we used to be. But quite frankly, the gap between have and have-nots is getting a lot worse in our society. I'm more relaxed with that. But as a teenager, I always felt that I could not enjoy the wealth. And then, of course, my parents...
As a teenager, you felt that. And
yeah.
Of course, your parents what?
Well, my parents sold the house when I was 22, and by the time I hit 25, 26, I was like, oh my God, where's the swimming pool? I want to swim. You know, I suddenly became
Where's
very
my tennis
bourgeois.
court?
Yeah.
But when you first moved to the big house, you must have felt very ostracized.
Yes.
What did they do to you? I mean, did they make fun of you? Did they ignore you? Or?
No, but you know what happened, actually? No one made fun of me. What happened was I started to wonder whether or not any of my friends wanted to be friends just for who I was, or whether they were happy to come over because they could use the facilities, because it was like a country club. And that's been a big issue for me throughout my entire life, the genuine nature of how people respond to me. Not to say I've been Gandhi-like, but I've done a lot to help different people in the last 10, 15 years or so, and I notice that when people can take things from me, they're my best friends, and when suddenly they have no use for me, I can't find them. And it's been an ongoing issue, and it started with the big house.
That's going to take a lifetime to work out.
Yeah, you know, it's not something that, this is about as close, by the way, as I'll get to therapy, you and I talking. It's actually a bit weird because as I speak, I'm talking about things I haven't spoken to anybody about.
And it's free.
So as a result of this talk, I may need therapy.
Probably.
Yeah.
Or I will.
Yeah, exactly.
Were you precocious growing up?
I don't know.
Sure you do. Sure you do. You know.
Okay, yeah, I was. In some ways. You know, we all have strengths and weaknesses. So there's certain things at a cognitive level I'm very strong with, and certain things I'm very weak with. So I was precocious because I read a lot. And reading Hegel and Kierkegaard when I was 12 years old, I don't think I understand a word.
Where'd you get them?
Oh, God. You just raised something weird. You know what I used to do? Actually, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this, but because of my, the sanctity of books, for me, as a young person, I was an elitist. I believe that most of the books in the library people would choose not to read. So I tended to take books from libraries. I had 3 different library cards under 3 different names.
Oh, Alan.
And I will tell you that after years and years of plundering our public libraries, I put everything in a garbage bag and put it all to Don Mills Library outside the door, so it's all back safely.
Just in case they're writing out a writ.
Yeah.
Did you stumble onto these thinkers on your own, or was there someone who said, hey?
I had a friend from about 6 years old till about 13, 14. That was 3 years older than me. And he introduced me to everything that adults fear. The whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. Not that I was doing drugs when I was 10 years old.
Not yet.
But he introduced me to Jimi Hendrix and Frank Zappa. And that was the single most important influence in my life. An album called We're Only In It For The Money, where Zappa makes fun of the hippies and the establishment. And I realized, yeah, don't single out one group to make fun of. We're all funny. We're all engaged in folly.
What did you do?
You know, like troublemaking, shit disturbing, things like that. We used to pull a lot of pranks. I mean, we were the type of kids that loved to go to a street and put all the garbage cans out in the street, then hide behind a bush just to see some irate driver get out and have to move the garbage cans. Like, that stuff doesn't happen these days because people carry guns and there's road rage and everything. But we'd do anything to watch what people's reactions would be.
Who was that?
Who was the person?
Yeah, the friend. What does he do now?
He's an accountant.
So what does it feel like to make people uncomfortable?
It's exhilarating. See, we all live really smug, complacent lives. We have very narrow universes. We structure our lives and we live within that box, and that's healthy. We need that. But it's not the real world. It's not the universe. You're filtering reality. So I like to expose little holes in people's boxes so they know there's something larger. That's why I use a lot of vulgarity and profanity in class. And I do sometimes upset the religious students. But don't be here. This is about criminal law. So I don't think it's comfortable, unless you can demonstrate to me right now that you're all prepared to swear in class. We can do pornography first. Anyone want to tell me to fuck off? You're going to have clients, I know you're going to bleep this out, what I'm going to say, but you're going to have clients that are going to sit down, and this is the way they talk. The fucking cops came up to me and they fucked me over, those fucking bastards. And if you can't relate to them at that level and talk at that level, don't practice criminal law.
So you're the man who became, we can quibble over this, but a great lawyer, but you didn't want to go to law school. So how is it that you ended up in law school?
I wanted to be a writer, and I decided that the best way to make money from writing, because the reality is you can be Margaret Atwood and make no money, was in film. So I went into film school at York University. The problem was my parents didn't like what I was doing. I was going out with a non-Jewish woman at the time, which they didn't like, so everything about my life was negative. And I've always had this thing about wanting to please my parents. And I went to Europe that summer. I did the backpack thing. I was planning to come back and do York, 4th year creative writing workshops. And I was in Carcassonne, France, and I decided to call my mother. And she told me that apparently I'd been accepted at Osgood. I had forgotten I even applied, but when you do the ALSAT, you tell them where to send the scores and everything. So she said, what should I do? Should I send the deposit in? And I didn't know how to say no. over the phone, like I could see the word no going all the way across the ocean, and then my mother, oh my God, end of life, right? So I said yes, and I thought I'd return and give it 2-3 days and I'd drop out, but something just kept going. Oh, okay, I'll check it out, I'll check it out. And of course what happens is you end up finishing the degree, well, you might as well see what the first job is like. It's always, might as well try it, might as well try it.
If you look at your CV, you won just about every book prize that was available, or essay prize, and you clerked for the Supreme Court of Canada for Boralaskan. Come on.
I did okay.
Come on, you did okay?
I'm like the way I am today, where I'm very irreverent and no judge scares me, and I will talk back to judges and confront them. Back then, I was just a law student who going to the High Priest of Canada. I didn't know what to call the man. When I interviewed him, and he was at the Hotel Toronto, and I was supposed to call up to his room to tell him I was there, I was at the phone 20 minutes. What do I call him? Chief Justice? My Lord? My Highness? I didn't know what to do. And in the 20 minutes it took, he actually came down to look for me, so I was able to walk behind him and pat him and say, excuse me, sir.
You.
Right? Yeah. So,
At the end of your time with him, what did you call him?
Chief Justice. I've been told I'm a good teacher, so I went back, did a graduate degree at Harvard, because you have to get a graduate degree.
I'm glad you put that in, because I was going to have to mention it if you didn't yourself.
Which was a joke, by the way. It was the easiest degree I've ever done in my life, but I love Boston, Cambridge. I mean, I'd love to go teach down there. Came back, started Osgood. First 3 years, just taught. And after about 3 years, I was bored already. It was easy. That's when I started to do cases. And the case that kind of changed everything was involving a rap tape called As Nasty as They Want to Be by Two Live Crew. It was banned in Florida, and I was asked to write an article about it. Anyways, I read about a bookseller in London, Ontario, who challenged the police and said he was going to sell the tape and was charged. So I called him up and said, hey, I just wrote an article on this. Do you want to talk? We ended up becoming good friends and started this litigation strategy together. It was all about racism, the case, because at the time, Andrew Dice Clay was one of the hottest selling tapes, which is one of the most offensive, misogynistic tapes I've ever heard in my life, yet that could be sold freely in London, yet this black rap group doing the same thing, suddenly they were prohibited.
So it's a sense not so much of just wanting to be out there and crazy. There's a real sense of injustice that's
no question about it.
You.
No question about it. And see, I have a bad rap in that sense because I know at the law school, and there's a lot of tension at the law school, there's this attitude, oh, as long as there's a camera, you know, Alan will find some way to put his face in front of it. That's the way they think. And it's not like that at all. I very carefully pick the cases that we go forward on. The client has to want the public exposure, first of all, and there has to be a reason for it. We usually, what the reason is, there's a political logjam, meaning Parliament won't deal with the issue. They haven't amended the obscenity law, the drug laws, the gambling laws in any meaningful way for years. So we use the cases as a way of exposing that. I had a man who was caught with a joint in his car, and he's an AIDS patient, and he smokes to reduce his nausea. And I asked the Crown to simply what's called divert the charge, which they withdraw the charge, you give a little charitable donation, you get no record. They wouldn't do it. They said he was in a car, and because he's in a car, that makes it more serious. And I said, this man is going to die. This is one joint. Here's a letter from his doctor indicating that he uses this for therapeutic value. What's the public interest? And though the Crown didn't disagree with me, I had to appear 9 times in court in order to secure that diversion. And that's like knocking your head against the wall. And I thought, I can't work in a system like that. People aren't acting reasonably. You've got a sick, dying man, you've got a minor instance of criminality, make it disappear immediately. Don't clog up the system. And that's the type of thing that started to become revolting to me. And I started to resent having to go 9 times for this. And I started to resent that no one would listen to me.
$40? Yep.
One of my few areas of success is medical marijuana. I put that on the map, and I'm very proud of myself, and it's sort of like my baby. I get calls, probably 5 to 10 calls a week from sick people. So how long have you been coming to the club?
I've been coming here about a month now. I have scoliosis, chronic back pain, migraine headaches.
And how did you end up here?
Well, I was actually walking along the street and somebody pointed it out to me, so I just...
Oh, it's just serendipity then.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about drugs.
Sure.
Because they're a big part of your,
Yeah.
I was going to say life, but that's for you to say. They're a big
Yeah.
part of your job.
Yeah.
What's your position on drugs?
Okay, I grew up in the drug subculture, and I saw and participated in recreational drug use, many different forms and substances. Obviously, as a 43-year-old adult, recreational drug use has lost much of its allure, and in recent years, I started to, think it could be a waste of time. But I believe experimental drug use is a very important part of adolescent development. And this is interesting. Actually, there's a study which demonstrates this. They looked at adolescent adjustment, and they found the best adjusted adolescents were the drug experimenters, the worst were the chronic users, of course, and in the middle were the abstainers. So it's actually the people who are kind of anal and repressive, just say no like Nancy Reagan. They're losing out a part of life. Because with the exception of certain synthetic drugs, which should have never been created,
Like
and they're a
what?
bane on our existence, speed, heroin, the natural occurring products and their alkaloids that induce hallucinogenic experiences, and marijuana, which has a hypnotic experience, allow people to see the world through different eyes. And you acquire wisdom when you're able to shed your skin. With responsible drug use, the health risks from illicit drugs are negligible.
Including LSD?
Yes. If you drive safely, the risks from driving are almost negligible. If you drive recklessly, you're going to die.
So you're telling us that all these studies that our parents read and told us about that pointed to, cancer obviously is out there because you smoke marijuana, and that's a reality. But brain damage, cellular damage.
Very little brain damage from most illicit drugs, first of all. And you got to understand, I got to be clear about that.
Forgetfulness.
What are we talking about? No, but anyway, you got to understand that people do not distinguish between drug use and drug abuse. It's drug abuse that will lead to deleterious impact on the body and on the spirit. But most drug users are experimental drug users. Let's take marijuana, which is the substance I know the most about.
Marijuana.
Less than 1% of marijuana users smoke on a daily basis. So 99% are using it responsibly. And even people who have had these binge periods where they smoke every day, and in the past I've had that, they suffer no ill effect. The only time a drug is going to screw you up is when you're doing it on a daily basis and it has addictive properties. And I'm probably the only lawyer who actually advocates drug use. Though publicly I don't. I'm doing this for your pleasure, but when I do my positions in the press and in court, I never say that. That's a taboo thing. We should still be, moving towards a lifestyle of abstention. We should be pure and clean. No one should use drugs. So my pitch in court is that drug use is not sufficiently harmful to activate state authority. But if I really was to speak truthfully, I'd say, hey, everyone here on the bench and in the court, let's go take a break and learn what life's really about.
I personally love to spank men.
Ontario's infamous dominatrix is back. Terry Jean Bedford is appealing her 1998 conviction of keeping a common body house.
Basically, I help people that are impoverished. I'm really the lawyer of last resort. I tend to get phone calls from people who've already called the 5 big lawyers in the city and they can't afford them or they won't help. I've learned how to use the court process and the media to expose issues in the public, and it actually works. Right now in 1998, we really have no idea whether SM fantasy role play is legal or illegal. So it's going to take some courageous dominatrix to come forward, get arrested again, and bring this issue before the court. You will speak to people in the bar, and they may say some very complimentary things about me, but you're going to get this a lot. You say, do you know Alan Young? Oh yeah, isn't he the guy who loses all his cases? That's the line on me. And it's because they don't understand what I do, and they think they're insulting me, but they're not. Because the cases I do that have a profile are designed to lose. They're not really good legal cases. They're cases that are there as tools for political reform, and the first step is education.
So an
with the medical
example of a
marijuana.
case that you would have taken and for political reasons as opposed to sort of precedent-setting reasons would be what? The body house?
Sure, the dominatrix case.
What were you trying to show there?
That people should, in a free and democratic society, have the right to choose to pay for alternative forms of sexuality. As simple as that. Bottom line, as I said, you come in this door, you shut the door, you shut the blinds. As long as you're not hurting anybody, you should be able to do whatever you want. And I can't believe the state wants to invest resources to go after people who enjoy spanking each other. I mean, to me, that is such an enormous waste of state resources. knowing that 27% of Canadians are still afraid to walk the streets at night. Hey, that's where we put the money, to make our streets safe, not to make our homes safe from people having fun.
So that's the theme that runs through so much of it then. Consenting adults who aren't hurting each other should be allowed to do what they want in a private place.
That is the only theme. That's the only work I do. And it became gambling, sex, and drugs, because those are the three main consent and obscenity law. Those are the main areas where adults consent to participate in a certain activity, and the big bad state is saying, wait a sec, this may not be good for you, it may not be good for society, so we don't want you to enjoy your life.
But where does that come from? I mean, were you ever told not to do something that you thought that you should be entitled to do?
I think it came from growing up in the early 70s. See, everyone talks about the 60s. You know, the 60s was a catalyst. But the real period was the early 70s, where people were liberated sexually and liberated in terms of drug-taking activity. It was all about pleasure-seeking activity. And I grew up in high school in that period, and we created this huge scene called the Mad Dog scene. We got my best friend elected as president. We took over the school.
What you've got to do, Studebaker, is you've got to find a head of lettuce, and inside that head of lettuce, you'll find a clue to the mysterious hideout of Neil Young. That's right, Studebaker. So just remember, the onus is on you. You've got to come through, okay?
Like Frank Zappa music was playing in the school when you walked in the morning. And
what school was this?
York Mills Collegiate.
I'm sorry I missed it.
Oh yeah, we used to dress up. I mean, it was a wonderful thing. But watching everyone party and enjoy themselves and express themselves sexually, because that's the period where the hormones start to rage, I knew in the back of my mind, without knowing anything about law, that a lot of the things my friends and I were participating in was illegal. And it always struck me as unusual because no one was getting hurt. And in fact, with the exception of some people that were just stupid and reckless and drank too much and they would do it anyways, most of us were acting responsibly and were, I think, achieving some degree of self-fulfillment in those teenage years. And maybe later on as an adult, as becoming a lawyer, I thought, well, at least let me protect where I came from. These are the people that I used to hang with, and God forbid, as they get older, their lives should be ruined because the state doesn't think they should be having this type of sexual practice or imbibing this type of illicit substance. And I guess I thought I should try to protect these people.
Okay, first chapter. Big, long chapter of Alan Young's life. Something happens here. Next big chapter is about to start, which is all about returning to writing and filmmaking. We're going to talk about that, but let's talk about the thing in the middle there. It's like a big tornado in your life.
Yeah, I've been struggling with this whole law thing for a while, wondering why I was still in it when there was other ambitions I had. So what had happened in the last 5 years or so was, as my professional profile was increasing, my personal life just fell apart. So there was a divorce with my ex-wife getting involved with a judge who was a friend of mine, and that was very uncomfortable and made it difficult for me to go to that court to argue cases, and also really made me wonder about the level of trust among friends. And then a law student, young lawyer who I brought in on some of my cases because he wanted to increase his profile, stole my life savings. Meanwhile, my sister was very ill, and I thought that was the only thing that was important, was dealing with her illness, yet everyone wanted me to deal with all this nonsense. And it was very difficult. It all came. Law student, judge, lawyer.
This is a pretty big message.
Oh, yeah. I've been involved with law now for almost 20 years, and I see horrible conflicts and not much resolution. And I reached the point where I believe lawyers are like a cancer on society. Lawyers make money off conflict. So they're actually in a conflict of interest in terms of resolving the conflict because it's not in their best interest to resolve it. And I saw this even with my own matrimonial case. And I don't fault the individuals. I know tons of people who are lawyers, have great integrity. It's an institutional cultural ethos. And you learn to aggravate conflict. I don't think it's a good thing. So I'm not that comfortable with training 365 new lawyers every year. We have far too many lawyers in North America. We got to go the Japanese route where we have more engineers than lawyers.
Is there any way of changing the institution, or do you have to tear the whole thing down since it is conflict-based?
To what extent were we able to change institutional religion? Not at all. It was an evolutionary process over hundreds of years and actually required a revolution called the Reformation for the first major change in Christianity. That's how hard it will be to change the legal profession.
What about your life savings? Did you get those back?
I got 90 cents on the dollar from the Law Society. But you know, I had to hire lawyers, and I didn't tell you that because I had to hire lawyers for my matrimonial and for my civil claims, and I realized it's a fate worse than death, having to hire a lawyer. It really is. It's a horrible thing. So in any event, I've reached a point now where I'm clean in terms of legal cases and teaching, and maybe it'll be my life decision, or maybe it's only going to be 12 months. Because right now all I'm doing is trying to center and focus myself, and if I regain my enthusiasm for the work I used to do, I'll do it again, because someone has to do it.
The next big chapter, we talked about the big chapter, the tornado, and now we're on this next big chapter. You are returning to writing.
Yes.
You want to get back to your roots as a filmmaker because you studied that in school. And you're studying the flute and doing all kinds of other things. So are you reborn?
No. I'm just retarding the decay. That's all that's happening. Is if I continued on the path I was on, though I'd probably be very successful, maybe even have a lot of money, I would be a 60-year-old cantankerous bastard. You know, and I'd probably be appointed to the bench and get the opportunity to yell at everybody the way judges yell at me. So I'm involved with meditation, yoga. I'm studying to be a shiatsu therapist. I study the Japanese flute because it's really a very meditative instrument, unlike a Western flute where you're going all over in crescendos and you know, these fast runs. This is very peaceful. And working a lot with my breath. And the idea and the goal is to return to the essence of what I was, which was a fairly quiet, laid-back person with very little ego attachment.
I can hear the people out there that you know, say don't have the nicest things to say about you, and they're saying, oh, there's Alan Young. Post-traumatic stress syndrome. He had a terrible shock in his life, and he is still reeling from it.
You know what's silly about that? I know, and people will say that, is what I'm doing now is where I came from. You should never forget where you came from. I had a detour. Unfortunately, it's occupied all my adult life, so I don't know much else. But I'm just returning to things I firmly believed in when I was 18, and so I don't see it as such a bizarre departure, though I must tell you, most people I speak to laugh.
When you come back, you're going to come back on your own terms.
Yes. Here's the good news. I am stronger than I've ever been in my life, and it's only because of the adversity. And I like feeling strong. And I realized, despite my public persona, I was a very weak, snivelly person prior to the last couple of years of adversity. Why it happened to me, I don't know. But I can't tell you as we sit here today, it's over. Every one of the crises that I've mentioned has reached a resolution, for better or worse. Being alone is actually a wonderful thing, and that's why I can do the shakuhachi flute and the shiatsu and write and stop working. I have no income coming in right now, but I have savings. Hey, if I had a family and was living with other people, I wouldn't feel good to do that because you want to put food on the table and clothing on their back and you want to be a responsible, mature adult. Now I can be totally immature. It's wonderful.